Danmachi is a series that is celebrating 10 years of existing and has released 18 volumes of main series light novels, 24 spin-off novels, many manga volumes, 4 anime seasons, and along with it, 1 spin-off anime season, a movie, and 3 OVAs, and a plethora of games as well. As a result, not only has the series' creator Fujino Omori had a lot to do, but also us as fans are subjugated to a lot of content and lore to digest. As a result, it's not easy if you're going from, let's say for example, being an anime only to reading the light novels and trying to figure out what the hell is going on and where to begin with. So in today's video, I'm going to be going over the chronological order of Danmachi along with the release order so that you get an idea on exactly how everything is set up and where to begin with. Furthermore, to help anime onlys, I will be ensuring that at certain points throughout this video, I will be placing myself into the position of an anime only and basically giving you guys an idea on what novels cover what anime season and thereby helping you guys get a good starting point depending on where you're leaving off of. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the video and let's start off with the chronological order. Now, before I get into the chronological order of Danmachi, I want to talk about the different sources of content for Danmachi, starting with the main one, which are the light novels. There are 2 major runs currently going on for Danmachi, one being the main series featuring Bell and the Hestia Familia, and the second being Sword Oratoria featuring Eyes and the Loki Familia. I will be referring to the main series as just Danmachi so that it helps you guys out in understanding which one is which, and there will also be logos on top of the volume images that you will see throughout this video to help you guys discern the series the volume is from. Danmachi's content and lore doesn't only come from the light novels, but also it comes from Danmachi Memoria Freese, a game developed by WFS and currently on its 6th anniversary. Danmachi Memoria Freese, or Danmemo as it's affectionately called, is a huge source of content as it not only just adapts the main novels, but also it's a ground for Omori sensei to have written some of his best works, including stories such as Argonaut and the ASTREA record, which originated in the game as an anniversary event and have been placed as canon stories. Both stories will and have been adapted into light novel format in the case of Argonaut and ASTREA record respectively, but you can read them in game or on YouTube thanks to various individuals recording the stories and uploading them onto YouTube. As such, for these stories, I will be attaching the Danmemo logo to them. Now, let's get on to the chronological order. Now, to start off the chronological order for Danmachi, we are looking at 2 stories that predate the start of the Danmachi main series by nearly 3,000 years and take place during the Age of Heroes. I am of course talking about the Argonaut and Knights of Fianna storylines. These stories take place in the age where gods did not exist and set up the foundation of Danmachi's lore, as it showcases the first ever heroes going up against monsters. Currently only available in Danmemo and as such on YouTube as well. These stories are extremely popular and loved by hardcore fans, with some even touting Argonaut as Omori's best work. In fact, Argonaut will be getting a light novel adaptation, with Volume 1 releasing in July of 2023 and Volume 2 releasing in August of 2023. I wouldn't recommend reading this story first without having experienced some of the mainline and Sword Oratoria stories, so I will be placing my recommendations on when to read these later in this video. Now, we move on to the ASTREA record light novels, as they are next in line in terms of the chronological order, and they take place about 7 years before the start of Danmachi's main series and showcase an Orario that is vastly different to the one that we know from the anime and main series novels, as we see one of the biggest threats that Orario has ever seen in the form of Erebus, Zard, and Althea, and their goal to do whatever it takes in their mission. This story originated in Danmemo and has received its light novel adaptation a few months ago across 3 volumes, but is only available in Japanese at this point in time. Like Argonaut and Knights of Fianna, I would recommend reading through some of the main series and Sword Oratoria novels before tackling this story. Now, before we move into the present timeline, there is one thing you need to know about the main series and Sword Oratoria, and that is the fact that they tend to overlap. What I mean by overlap is that you will tend to see Bell's events and situations from the perspective of Eyes and the Loki Familia, and while this is a common occurrence, it doesn't necessarily occur vice versa, in that you don't see Bell and the Hestia Familia's perspective in the main series of what happens to Eyes and the Loki Familia. It's rare and pretty much unlikely to happen, but in Sword Oratoria, it's very common to see Eyes and the Loki Familia looking at Bell's actions. Now, to start off the present timeline's orders, we will start off very simple and look at the starting novels of both Danmachi and Sword Art Online with their Volume 1 books. The start of everything from Belle meeting Eyes and vice versa to the Hostess of Fertility situation where Bet is bad-mouthing Belle basically, and then of course the Monsterphilia event. To help you guys out, like I said, I'll be leaving images of the cover of the volume along with the volume number and the logo of the series / run that they are from. Next up, it's Danmachi Volume 2 and Sword Art Online Volume 2, the next iterations in the series. This will be a common appearance wherein you'll see two novels at the same time chronologically because of how the events overlap, and that's no different in our next in timeline volumes, Danmachi Volume 3 and Sword Art Online Volume 3. Yet again, two novels that take place at a similar timeline. Now, things get different, as the next story is solely Sword Art Online Volume 4, as you will see a lot of the events from Danmachi Volume 3 in the start of this novel, and also it will have its own events occurring. The main thing to note about this volume is that this is where the anime adaptation of Sword Art Online stops, and that if you are looking to pick up the novels, you will start off with Sword Art Online Volume 5, which we'll get into a moment. I would nonetheless urge anime onlys to pick up volumes 1 to 4 for Sword Art Online because of how bad the anime was. Anyways, SO anime slander aside, we move on to the next stories in the timeline as we move on to Danmachi Volume 4, which overlaps a little bit with both Sword Art Online Volume 4 and Volume 5, but is still very much in the crossover period of the two volumes. Next up in line, we obviously have Danmachi Volume 5 and Sword Art Online Volume 5, wherein in the case of Danmachi Volume 5, we hit the end of Danmachi's first anime season and the start of the unknown in the case of Sword Art Online anime onlys. At this point, I would also recommend starting the Argonaut storyline as we get to see the reasons behind the comparisons between Belle and the original Argonaut as well. So this is where I would recommend going back in time 3,000 years in the past and reading the Argonaut story, of course. We then move into Danmachi Volume 6 and Sword Art Online Volume 6, which in the case of Danmachi Volume 6, it is the start of the second season of the anime. And at this point, I would like to point out that it has only been 2 months since the start of Danmachi Volume 1 in terms of the actual story timeline. A lot of things tend to happen within days for our protagonists in Danmachi. Next up, it's Danmachi Volume 7 and not Sword Art Online this time, as we now shift our focus to the familiar Chronicle stories with episode Ryu events taking place here, while also showing flashbacks to events prior to the start of Danmachi. Episode Ryu, while only being in light novel format, is also available to experience in Danmemo. Sword Art Online Volume 7 takes place next as things are ramping up for the Loki Familia here, and this is where I would also highly urge you guys to possibly not just read the light novels for Sword Art Online, but to also read the Danmemo versions of these stories, as the voice acting is absolutely fantastic. Following Sword Art Online Volume 7, we move on to Sword Art Online Volume 8, which basically ends the arc that started in Sword Art Online Volume 7 and is very significant for some members of the Loki Familia. Now, we move back not only to Danmachi Volume 8, but also we move on to Sword Art Online Volume 9, which, like episode Ryu, features some flashbacks to before the events of Danmachi's present timeline. Note that this is where Season 2 of the anime ends, but also the fact that Danmachi Volume 8 was not completely adapted in the anime, to my disappointment, as it features a lot of development for certain characters. This is also the point where I would also recommend reading Knights of Fianna, provided you have read the light novel version of Volume 8. Now we take a short detour at this point to experience another iteration in the Familiar Chronicles with some moments of episode FREYA taking place here. Now, episode FREYA majorly is flashbacks for the FREYA Familia and their past, but nonetheless there are some events that take place during Volume 8 and 9 basically, so you want to read episode FREYA right here. Now we move on to the XENOS arc, which I'm going to collate entirely together as one, as they take place at very similar times, one after another. And this is the entirety of Danmachi Season 3, with volumes 9 to 11 being one of the key stories of Danmachi. While the events of the XENOS arc are going on, Sword Art Online Volume 10 basically brings in the perspective of Eyes and the Loki Familia and their thoughts on what the hell is going on in Danmachi Volume 11. So if you want to read them simultaneously, I would recommend starting Sword Art Online Volume 10 at the same time as Danmachi Volume 11. Next up, we have Danmachi Volume 12 and Sword Art Online Volume 11, starting off with Danmachi Volume 12 being the start of Danmachi Season 4 and Sword Art Online 11 being effectively the Infinity War of Sword Art Online. Extremely crazy events happen here. I highly recommend reading it. Honestly, this is the story I urge you guys to get to because it's so good. while Sword Oratoria 11 is still ongoing, the events of Danmachi Volume 13 and 14 happen as we wrap up the events of Danmachi Season 4 with these two light novels. After the events of Sword Oratoria 11 and Danmachi Volume 14, we have the events of Sword Oratoria Volume 12 happening, which is basically the end game of Sword Oratoria, and currently at the time this video goes out, the main event of Danmemo's 6th anniversary featuring completely voiced stories and cutscenes adapted from Sword Oratoria Volume 12. Now, we move into the Danmachi light novels that haven't been adapted into anime format yet, starting with Volume 15, which is similar to Volume 8 in that it develops a lot of different characters. We then move on into the next arc of Danmachi, which is Volume 16 to 18, and that is all that has released so far for Danmachi's main series. I won't mention anything that happens in Danmachi's Volume 16 to 18 because, of course, spoilers, right? I don't think a lot of people have read the light novels or have, been in up to date with all the spoilery stuff, so I would highly urge you guys to make sure not to spoil anything about these light novels in the comment section down below. Similarly, we also have Sword Oratoria Volume 13 and 14 that have just released in Japan as well, and they take place after the events of Volume 16 to 18 of the main series. We do also have confirmation that Volume 19 of Danmachi's main series will be releasing in Japan in September 2023, and I don't have an image for it yet because we still don't have a cover for Volume 19 yet. But I will say this, is that Volume 19 will take place at the same time as Sword Oratoria Volume 13, so keep that in mind as well. That is the chronological order for Danmachi. A lot of stuff to keep note of, a lot of spin-offs to take note of as well, and it's a very complicated timeline, to be quite honest, because a lot of events overlap, there are a lot of flashbacks as well, so it's pretty hard to keep up with, but hopefully I could help you out in some way, shape, or form, and hopefully this video can be a little bit easy for you guys to understand. Of course, with all the imagery and stuff, it should help you guys a little bit. But we move on to the release order for Danmachi, because unfortunately the chronological order isn't the release order. We got a completely different release order, which made things a lot harder to keep up to date with because of how events were placed and everything. But hopefully you guys can experience the chronological order if you are just starting off with the Danmachi stories, of course. Now, the release order is very, very simple. We're going to start off with Danmachi Volume 1, then we move on to Danmachi Volume 2, then Volume 3, then Volume 4, and basically we got a couple of Danmachi volumes to experience, and then we got Sword Oratoria Volume 1 basically. So we had Danmachi Volume 1 to 4, and then we got Sword Oratoria Volume 1. Then we had Danmachi Volume 5, Sword Oratoria Volume 2, Danmachi Volume 6, Sword Oratoria Volume 3, Danmachi Volume 7, Sword Oratoria 4, Danmachi Volume 8, Danmachi Volume 9, then Sword Oratoria 5, Danmachi Volume 10, Sword Oratoria Volume 6, Danmachi Volume 11, Sword Oratoria Volume 7, Episode Ryu, Sword Oratoria Volume 8, Danmachi Volume 12, Sword Oratoria 9, Danmachi Volume 13, Sword Oratoria Volume 10, Danmachi 14, Sword Oratoria 11, Danmachi 15, Sword Oratoria 12, Episode FREYA, Danmachi Volume 16, 17, 18, and then we got Sword Oratoria 13 and 14. I haven't included the Argonaut and ASTREA record storylines in this release order because, of course, the Danmemo original dates are different to the actual light novel dates, so I haven't included those because it would just get very confusing as well. But, of course, I made sure to mention ASTREA record, Argonaut, and Knights of Fianna in the chronological order so that you guys could get a better understanding of exactly when things took place basically. But yes, there you guys go. Hopefully I could help you guys out in some way, shape, or form. If you guys enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you guys would like to see next in line for my content for Danmachi, and of course any other Danmachi content you'd like to see. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Take it easy, everybody. Bye bye.